In the last video, I talked about the idea of making papers within Coreal Painter all by itself. And that is an option. However, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about it. And the most obvious way is actually not really the best. And I'll show you what I mean. But to begin with, I'm just going to go over to Edit Clear to clear off our work surface. And I'm going to use the space bar to move over to the beginning of the document over here so that we have some blank space to work with for testing out these new papers that we're going to make. To begin with here, you'll notice that there are two ways that we can access the Make Paper command. The first is through this flyout menu here, and you can see that we have the Make Paper command. But if we go to Paper Libraries, you can see that we have the Make Paper icon. If we click on either of those, we'll get the Make Paper dialog. Now, I will tell you right up front that this makes a paper that's probably not what you're looking for 9 times out of 10. However, when you need it, and it's the only way to get it, so certainly something to think about. Now, when we're working here, I might call this one something like Zip, because it reminds me of Zipatone, which is an old-fashioned printed film that we used to have in the old days when we did everything by hand, where you would actually cut it out and stick it down on top of line art to create gradations of value. Now, we have different patterns that we can choose. We've got, let me go ahead actually before I do that, let's go ahead and increase the spacing so that you can see what these patterns really are. So this first one is halftone, then we have new halftone, then we have line, then we have diamond, square, circle, ellipse, and triangle. Now, typically speaking, for me, I would probably go for new halftone or halftone 9 times out of 10. And maybe I'll go for new halftone just because we don't currently have one up there. You'll notice that this small dots texture here is pretty much just the regular old halftone. It's just been processed slightly. But we're going to go ahead and choose the new halftone, and we're just going to go ahead and reduce the spacing down to something like, say, 10. And we're not going to worry about changing the angle. You could if you wanted to. You could see how that gives you a little bit of a different variation. This will be more obvious with different patterns, but generally speaking, we'll just leave the angle set to 0, hit OK. And there you can see that we now have Zip, and Zip is the active paper texture. If I go to the main papers palette, you can see that I can control this by turning on the directional toggle. And I'll go ahead and just click in the canvas to reveal that paper grain. Now, of course, as usual, we can scale this down to get a smaller, tighter paper grain if that's what we want. And this is a really excellent way of getting certain types of really machine-looking canvases, for instance, as the type of texture that really comes through clearly with these dot patterns. However, if we're looking for something a little bit more organic and a little bit more chaotic, there's a much, much better workflow than using the Make Paper command. However, it's going to require that we do a little bit of juggling in the program, and we're going to have to go through several steps. So it'll actually be spread out over 2 videos as to how to take the best advantage of this next workflow that we're going to talk about, which is going to be creating a fractal-based paper.